A sliver of matter older than our sun has cut a merciless line through the heliosphere, a needle of velocity and vector that reads like a secret stitched into space-time. There is an urgency in the way it moves, an eloquence of numbers that speaks in eccentricity greater than one, in kilometers per second that refuse the quiet gravity of home. In its wake, we feel the ancientness of other dawns, alien protostars blooming in distant arms of the galaxy, storms of planet formation flinging shrapnel into gulfs so wide that our words thin out. And now one shard has crossed the ocean to us. It does not ask to be understood. It simply passes, a messenger without a voice, trusting that we will supply the language. We aim our mirrors and radios and equations at its brief arc, and we are reminded that the universe does not knock before it enters. It writes its presence across the sky and lets curiosity do the rest. They called it Three-Eye Atlas, underscoring two truths at once, that it is the third of its kind we have caught sprinting between the stars, and that it was flagged by a vigilant net of wide-field cameras meant to guard our planet from surprises. Designations are our first spell of control. They pin a moving thing to an idea, and ideas can be dissected. Its inbound track was hyperbolic, its barycentric speed steeped in the kinematics of the galactic randoms, faster than any comet chained by the sun could legitimately claim. The numbers placed its birthplace elsewhere, not because we saw the star that launched it, but because nothing born to this system returns with such disdain for orbit. It came in cold, at a slant that made veteran observers lean forward. No family of known long-period comets traced the same highway. There was the faintest blush of activity as solar heat began to nibble at its crust, a soft coma feathering around a nucleus we could not resolve. The sky grew a new sentence, and telescopes fought the weather, the moonlight, and the dawn to finish it. We learned its character, as all astronomers do, by listening to the light. Photometry plotted a brightness curve that lived somewhere between a sullen coal and a dusty snowball. The phase function hinted at roughness. Spectroscopy in the optical and near-infrared reached for fingerprints, broad absorption features, gentle slopes betraying organics, cautious hints of water and carbon-bearing volatiles. There were nights when the spectrographs found almost nothing, as if the object were determined to keep its molecules close. Radar pings failed to catch it. The geometry refused us that intimacy. But astrometry never lies, and the chain of precise positions, each time stamp a metronome click, allowed dynamicalists to shave uncertainties until the orbit gleamed. Eccentricity greater than one remained, and with it the certainty of exile. Its inbound asymptote, its poetic before, pointed into a region of sky away from the plane of our system's birth. Its outbound asymptote, the after, would aim into a future we cannot follow. We logged its spin state constraints from subtle brightness variations and noted that a tumbling body fits the data. We cataloged small changes in the coma as the heliocentric distance shrank, and we fed the raw numbers into a machinery of models that hums in universities and space agencies alike, where curiosity is industrial scale. Then the deviations began, not brazen enough to break physics, but mischievous enough to demand a second glance. The orbit solution improved, and with it a residual diagram bloomed like a heartbeat overlaid with noise. Those residuals should look random, instead a whisper of pattern threaded through them. Brightness increased slightly ahead of where the solar heating curve would have insisted, then lagged as if some side of the nucleus was hoarding its reserves. Non-gravitational accelerations, those delicate rocket pushes from jets of sublimating ice, are well known, and the usual parameterizations tried to tame the data. They helped, but not perfectly. The slight cross-track acceleration was wrong-footed by a few microarc seconds per hour, an amount so small you could laugh at it, unless you remember that nature sometimes hides the key in what the laughter overlooks. Was it asymmetric outgassing from a lopsided shape? Was it a curtain of dust, ragged and optically thin, biasing our photometry? Or was it a surface strewn with exotic ices that sublimated in sudden, cliff-like episodes? The telescope logs filled with caveats and with motivation. more time, more nights, more patience. And in that liminal space between certainty and rumor, imagination nudged the door. Speculation is not a dismissal of rigor. It is the scaffolding we erect so rigor can climb. We allowed ourselves to sketch the possibilities because we planned to erase the wrong ones. Perhaps 3I Atlas is a shard from the frozen outskirts of a star richer in carbon than ours, its chemistry tuned by a nursery that baked different recipes into its rock. Perhaps its density is so low, a fractal snow, drift of aggregates, that sunlight itself shoves it slightly more than our priors admit, a cousin to earlier visitors whose accelerations provoked fierce debate. Perhaps we are seeing seasonal effects on an object that has never known a season intense enough to matter until now. Or if one wishes to test the fence line of the possible, perhaps the object is not entirely natural in topology, a rind low in density, a cavity, a flattened plate of layered volatiles behaving like a very poor sail under the pressure of the sun. The moment such words are spoken, an electric caution floods the room, extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence, but exploration has always lived in that uncomfortable fever between what is elegant and what is true. We draft hypotheses knowing that most will fall, and we do it anyway because one might stand. Meanwhile, the sky made a pattern that was hard to ignore. Solar wind monitors registered compressions in the flow within days of the object's crossing of certain heliocentric latitudes. Meteor radars on Earth logged enhanced echoes at longitudes that seemed to rhyme with the inbound node. These are coincidences until they are not, and the burden of proof is heavy. Still, the timing nudged the narrative into a minor key. What if the coma's dust was so finely grained that it briefly modified local plasma behavior, a tiny seed in a vast river, noticeable only because our instruments are now sharp enough to hear a grain fall? Or what if the meteor echoes were simply Earth's own modest encounter with unrelated debris that we, pattern-hungry, braided into an illusion of connection? The statistics were brittle. One uses that word when a trend shatters the moment you handle it too firmly. Yet we learn something by trying to correlate the unrelated. The solar system is a storm of overlapping phenomena, and our pattern-finding minds must be disciplined, else we will always be haunted by meaningful shadows that were never there. The Sun, Jupiter, and the invisible geometry of space-time compose the score the object danced to, and dynamics is our orchestra pit. We watch the inbound leg bend under the sun's pull, the velocity vector reorienting as if bowing to a monarch it would never serve. Far away, massive Jupiter wrote a marginal footnote into the trajectory, no close pass. But every giant's gravity extends its opinion over 100 million miles. The sun's slight oblateness, so subtle that only careful calculations bother to include it, made a contribution even if tiny. Radiation pressure joined the conversation, pushing dust away into a fan that mapped the object's motion in negative space. If sublimation jets were active, they were the hidden engines of nuance, adjusting the outbound asymptote by an angle you could cover with a fingernail held at arm's length. But a fingernail is a continent when you are drawing maps between stars. We played what if with gravity assists. If a future encounter ever aligned with a planet, a slingshot could swap an interstellar path for a captive dance, but the probabilities were more poetic than practical. This was a visitor, not a migrant. Then the sun oaked the stage and our eyes went blind. Solar glare is a physical law masquerading as an inconvenience. There was an interval where ground-based telescopes could not stare into that blaze without melting their data into noise. The blackout period was expected, a geometrical eclipse of capability. Yet it arrived braided with mundane human noise. Some nights lost to weather, some to scheduling, some to maintenance, some to the simple fact that telescopes must choose, and the sky never stops offering alternatives. On public observation logs, a handful of planned sessions evaporated. Instrument faults, cloudy nights, budget-shifted priorities, and in the empty space left behind, suspicion sprouted like mold in a closed room. Conspiracy is a magnet for anxiety because it converts chaos into intent. Messages threaded forums. Why were those frames never released? Did someone see something they chose to keep? The answer was both boring and profound. Science is messy, and gaps in a time series are often not sinister at all. But those gaps ache when you care, and we cared. The post-conjunction first detection felt like the return of a heartbeat in a chest you feared had stopped. We asked what it means to meet a world in transit. The practical mind drew up plans that had long been sitting on whiteboards, rapid response interceptors on standby at gravitational waypoints, spacecraft that can wake, maneuver, and sprint on a few months' notice to sample the unknown. The philosophical mind stretched further. Interstellar debris is a census of how planets fail and systems shed their skins. Each fragment carries isotopic histories of ancient supernovae and the quiet chemistry of cold clouds. If these objects are common, and evidence suggests the galaxy is sprinkled with them, then our solar system is not isolated. It is threaded by a commerce of stones, ices, and dust, a slow exchange across light years that makes every star's story a little communal. Technology follows where awe leads. Better survey telescopes scanning deeper and faster, spectrographs that can cradle a whisper of signal in a cradle of noise, sample return dreamers daring to bottle a breath of alien comet and bring it home. The first time we touch such an object in flight would change more than textbooks. It would begin to make the galaxy personal. What then shall we do with this encounter, so brief that you could miss it if life's errands kept you busy? We will write better software that can recognize the telltale hyperbolic signatures faster. We will fund networks that never sleep, distributed across latitudes and longitudes so the weather's veto grows weaker. We will station sentinel craft in strategic orbits, perhaps at the Earth-Sun Lagrange points, equipped with dust analyzers, cameras that can pivot, propulsion able to pounce. We will study non-gravitational accelerations until they sing like a solvable chord, the physics of jets and the thermal inertia of crusts, the way porous aggregates drink heat and exhale thrust, the roles of supervolatiles that vaporize at temperatures a human hand might tolerate. We will entertain wild ideas with a stricter posture, light sails, fractal aerogels, engineered shells that mimic natural fluff, then test them against the relentless, unromantic arithmetic of observation. And we will teach, because each discovery blooms most fully when the wonder becomes common knowledge, a shared vocabulary for a species that still looks up through city lights and remembers the dark. Underneath it all lies a question that keeps both poets and physicists awake. Are we alone? And if we are not, how would the presence of others first graze our senses? A probe would not introduce itself. It would hide in plain sight, wearing the cloak of a rock, whispering in acceleration so small that only a civilization with patience could decode them. But to leap there is to skip steps, and science is the art of not skipping. So we tread carefully. We contemplate origin stories more modest and no less thrilling. A planetesimal flung by the tantrums of early planet formation, a fragment carved by collisions in a far Oort cloud, a fugitive escaping the evaporating disk of a red dwarf that has long since burned quiet. The galaxy is generous with stones and stories, and it does not need intention to be interesting. Yet we are a species built for meaning, and meaning sometimes rises from the sober recognition that nature itself is the greatest dramatist. The curves on our plots, the lines in our code, the solitary pale smear on a CCD frame, they can feel like scripture if you let them. I think of the engineers who stare at propellant budgets and delta V like composers counting measures in a symphony they cannot yet hear performed. I think of the observers at small telescopes who catch the faint object in the hour before dawn and type its coordinates into a world where anyone can read them. I think of the students chewing on perturbation theory and numerical integrators, learning to coax stability from chaos. All of them are collaborating with a fragment of matter that does not know it is being watched. This is the unspoken pact of astronomy. The universe does not intend to teach, but it is generous with examples if we learn how to listen. 3i Atlas will leave us soon. Its outbound asymptote will harden into a promise our species cannot yet follow. But the equations it tightened, the instruments it challenged, the imaginations it fed, these will remain like footprints in fresh snow that refuse to melt. Where does that leave us? On the cusp, as always. The future of exploration is a chain of readiness. Survey telescopes combing the sky nightly with eyes that never blink. Alert networks that translate a faint motion into global coordination in minutes. Space laboratories posted like patient anglers where gravity is calm. Propulsion systems that blur the border between too late and just in time. Our maps, not of continents but of vector spaces and error ellipses, will grow more precise. Our prejudice will shrink until a strange acceleration is no longer an omen, but a parameter, with a name and a model, with a pedigree. And one day our interceptors will not merely pass through a coma and taste it. They will rendezvous, match velocity, and ride alongside a messenger from another nursery, listening to its molecules sing. From that intimacy, new chemistry will enter our textbooks, new engineering will enter our factories, and perhaps, quietly, new humility will enter our hearts. We will know a little more of how planets begin and how they end, and in knowing that, we will know ourselves. Yet the most important cargo this visitor carries may be psychological. It rewrites our sense of neighborhood. Once we thought of the solar system as an island, we now understand it as a porous shoreline. There is a commerce of matter through the galaxy, slow and sparse but utterly real, and we are both exporters and importers. Pandemic comets have likely ferried organics from star to star for billions of years. The ingredients of life do not respect borders. When the next messenger arrives, and the next will, the media will ask if it is a threat, if it is a ship, if it is a sign. The real answer will be more powerful because it is quieter. It is an opportunity for a species that learned to turn starlight into knowledge. Each encounter is a rehearsal for deeper things. For interstellar probes we will one day launch on beams of light. For telescopes that will read the colors in exoplanet skies and find the faint vandalism of biology etched there. For the day when between the stars is not a phrase reserved for poets, but a route filed by navigators. So let this be our posture: vigilance without paranoia, wonder without credulity, ambition without haste. 3i Atlas crossed our sky and offered us a mirror. In it, we see a civilization capable of catching whispers from the dark and translating them into sentences that change our future. We see the shape of missions not yet built, of classrooms not yet filled, of papers not yet written that will become the bones of new understanding. Above all, we see that the universe keeps its promises, that if we look up long enough, the sky will send something worth the looking. And when it does, we will be ready, not to own it, not to name it into obedience, but to listen so carefully that the line it cuts through our night becomes a door.